house in Truckee, they've moved over right off of 50 on the south side of Lake Tahoe now.
Lovely. I have a friend that lives there.
Before that, they lived in Sacramento for a number of years.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
They got out of California. So they're Nevada now. So.
Oh, well, that makes sense. Lots of people fleeing.
Mark, why don't you go ahead and just open us up so we can just let other people listen to us get ready here.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey, everyone. This is Wayne and Keisha and Mark and Areve, I believe, and we're just warming up here, getting ready for the webinar that'll start in about 3 minutes. And I hope it's a wonderful day wherever you're at in the world. Keisha's in Nevada City, California. I am in Berthoud, Colorado, and where I'm most of the time at. And actually, for our webinar on Wednesday, I'll be in Wixom, Michigan, north of Detroit, working on a pretty cool project with some wetlands and a couple ponds that we're converting into something a little more useful than what they are now. So Keisha, did we find out about you? Did Sierra reach out to you through maybe an Instagram account? She's been reaching out to people based on Instagram.
Yeah, I think that's who originally found me. Was it Instagram or perhaps it was email? But yeah, I think that's how we got found.
Cool. Well,
yeah, actually, we were talking earlier, Wayne. I got to be involved in one of the webinars that you hosted through the Soil Food Web School last year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was so familiar with the name, and I couldn't remember. And you hosted one of the webinars that the school had for a promotional period.
Yeah, we've actually hosted Elaine probably 5 times, and I am having very serious discussions with her about our 2 entities becoming more closely related, and I think there's a really good chance that's going to happen. I actually have a call with her tomorrow about that. So.
Fantastic. Good to hear.
So are you a consultant doing Soil Food Web consulting for clients?
Well, you know what? I've been working on graduating that program for 4 years now, and we just got the word today that minus some small grammar errors, we've been accepted. So I cannot claim yet that I'm fully certified, but I will be hopefully in the next week or 2. So we've been working with them for a while, and I actually attended her last school when it was called Environment Celebrations Institute, and then kind of carried over into the new school. Yeah.
So did you meet Luke Luca during any of your time frame?
Yeah, I know Luke Luca well. Yeah, I've been chatting with him since, I guess since the school started. Yeah, I know him. He actually came and visited our farm one day when he was in the States. It was really cool.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Mark, why don't we go ahead and start recording, and we'll just formally get started here. Awesome. Hey, everybody. Welcome. This is going to be a real fun session today. Keisha and I just figured out that we have actually been on a call together before. Many of you know that we've hosted Elaine Ingham several times, 4 times, I believe, maybe 5, doing her presentations about the soil food web and also about microbes and their beneficial impact on soil and her method of composting, actually. So we may hear a little more about that, but Keisha reminded me that we were on a call together one time, and she just said that minus just a little paperwork, she's very close to finishing her certification with Elaine. I was trying to think of the name of the lady that's now heading up Soil Food Web's entire academic program. Kristen comes to mind, but I'm not sure that's right. I haven't met her yet. Luke's going to introduce me to her.
Kim Martin, I believe.
Yeah, that's it. That's who it is. It's Kim.
Fantastic. Love her.
does she have a farm herself? Do you know?
You know, I think she does, but I can't recall. She's so busy with the school now. I doubt she's doing much farming.
Right, right. Well, we're going to do this today, everybody, as an interview format, and you can see that Arib is going to put up a bunch of really cool slides that will show different elements of Keisha's business, and I'd like you to put questions in, and Mark will be looking for those. So Mark and Arib and I are sort of the hosts here today, and Keisha's our guest. And so Mark, would you please look for, when you get some questions, if it makes sense to interrupt us, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, we'll catch questions at the end. A lot of times we don't get as many questions as I think we should. So there's not a bad question. Everyone's a good one. So if you would, make sure to type your questions in. And actually, at the end, if any of you want, there's a little icon there that looks like a hand raise, and you could put that on, and we'll unmute you maybe, and we can let you ask a question of Keisha live. So we'll go for about an hour, and we're very respectful of our speaker's time. And if there's questions that go longer, we'll ask Keisha if she's got a little bit of time to go longer. But anyway, thanks for coming. Appreciate you all being here. I'm going to ask you to do your first typing right now. Put in the little question box where you're at in the world. And second, put in, if you're hearing us all right, and seeing us on our webcam and the slides, put a 1 in. In internet jargon, 1 means I agree with you. Yes, that's right. So if you'll do that, that'd be great. So Keisha, take us back in your life. Tell us sort of about your youth and where you grew up and sort of what that background is.
Sure thing. I actually grew up in the Midwest in southern Missouri, just north of Arkansas in a little town called West Plains. My family, they're all farmers. I was raised on a cattle farm. We grew all of our own veggies. And even today, all my family members that still live there are involved in some sort of farming. I moved out to California for my formative years after high school and became a massage therapist, and did that for a number of years. And I guess the most interesting thing I've done so far is my partner and I spent some time in Ecuador, I guess 5 or 6 years. And we were living in this really cool community that's up in the Andes there. And it was like a 4 or 5 mile hike from the nearest road. And we spent most of our time working on like forest regeneration and land regeneration. The guy that started the community was really obsessed with this idea of building fertility in place. And so there was this big rule when we were there that there was no lime, no gypsum, no fertilizers. Nothing was allowed to come up the mountain and be used on the gardens. We had to make all of our fertility right there in space. And so that's really what, I mean, besides my being raised on a farm, that's what really got me thinking about microorganisms, composting, and regenerative efforts. I really learned a lot up there and was able to spend a lot of years just teaching people basic worm composting, basic, static piles, and just, how to build your own house, how to cook your own food, this kind of thing. We'd get volunteers from all over the place that would come in and just hang out with us for, 2 weeks, 2 months. It was really, really neat.
What was the altitude there in the Andes?
Oh gosh, I wish I could remember off the top of my head. But we were pretty high up. We were so high up that a lot of crops are really hard to grow. We were above the banana line for sure. So yeah, that was something we were always working against. It wasn't cold, the weather was nice, but standard crops like tomatoes and melons and watermelons, they just won't grow up there. So we went lost crop of the Incan style. I don't know if you've ever read that book, but there are all these neat crops that we don't even know about here in North America. Things like just really odd root vegetables and different types of corn and beans and things that we don't really see here.
Well, the reason I ask altitude-wise is I have a wish list, bucket list thing for me is to go to Peru. we raise alpacas, and that's where Bolivia and Peru and Chile, and actually now Argentina, but they've really been imported into Argentina, is what the native range for alpacas is. I wondered what would be the ruminant, the wild ruminant that would be in the area that you were at when you were there.
So it was, I can't remember the name of them, but they're the smallest species of deer on the planet. They look really similar to the deer that we see, the white-tailed deer here in, California, Nevada, all across the, North America. But they're just little bitty, teeny things. They only stand a few feet tall. And, we didn't get to see them very often. Unfortunately, the area that we were in had been just mass burned all the time to create grasslands for cattle, which in that environment, you can imagine it's quite steep. And so if you burn it the wrong time of year, when the rains come, it takes all the vegetation away and destroys all the habitat for wildlife. And so, as we would start to allow trees to grow back and grass to grow back and shrubbery to grow back, we would see more animals. But generally speaking, it was birds that we would see coming in. I was lucky enough to see one of the little deer in town one time in somebody's backyard, but yeah, they're not as populated in the area as you would hope.
Other than man, what would be the keystone species in terms of the other end of the spectrum, predator type? Are there cougars or?
Yes, absolutely. There's let's see, they're called tigrillo, which is like it's a small cat. So it's smaller than a bobcat and kind of lynxy looking. They have little tufts of hair on their ears. But they're very small, just slightly bigger than a house cat, or the size of a really big house cat, I guess you could say. And we would have those. They would try to get our chickens, and so we would get to see those. And there's also puma, the same puma we have here. It travels, that whole landmass they get around. So, and I'm sure there's other cats, but not where we were located. More in the cloud forest and at lower elevations. But we had puma and tigrillo. Maybe ocelot is the name for it. I'm not certain what the name in English is for that little cat. Well, there's also bears.
Ocelots are spotted. Was this a spotted cat?
Yeah, kind of stripy, spotty. Yeah, every time it's like I have this vague, memory because the moment they would see us, they would jet, and so I wish I got more time with them, but. Well, generally, it was a panicked sighting because I'm just like, oh, don't kill our animals. At the same time, feeling very grateful that they're getting the food they need. So
now take us, closer to the present, and just because we see a book that we just saw on the slide from Matt Powers on regenerative soil. Matt's been with us several times, and we've actually been affiliates of Matt in helping sell his programs. So Matt's a good friend. But tell us about, again, that transition from massage therapy and then you went to South America. But what led you into what you're doing today and what's that process?
Sure thing. So when I was making compost piles there, like I was telling you about, every once in a while, one of my compost piles would just produce amazing results. When I said that you couldn't grow tomatoes or you couldn't grow these crops that we're used to here, basil, that we're used to in North America, sometimes I would actually be able to get those crops to grow. Something about the compost, I believed, was making it work out. And other times it wasn't. It wasn't every single pile I used, there's something that was changing and I didn't know what it was. When I was living here, I was coming back and forth and I'd heard about compost teas. I'd heard about Elaine Ingham through the Jeff Lowenfeld book, Teaming with Microbes. And so I had an idea that microbes existed. I knew that there was these packets that you could buy. They're called like compost tea starter kits. And in these little packets, there were these very expensive microorganisms, and I mean very expensive microorganisms. And I thought, well, there's got to be a way to learn how to cultivate these and use them, and perhaps this has something to do with the compost I'm making. So I got online and I started searching for Elaine. I thought she was teaching at University of Oregon at the time, and I was thinking about coming back here and getting involved in university so I could take her classes. And when I started looking online, I found out that she'd started her own school called Environment Celebration Institute. So my immediate idea was that I would go to school with her. I would learn how to cultivate these microbes and grow them on my own. And then I would take that knowledge back to the mountain and, just improve our practices there and hopefully step up our regeneration efforts even more than what we'd already done. And what ended up happening was we stayed in Ecuador and completed our foundation courses. And I just fell in love. I love the microscope. I loved the work. And so I decided to come back and start learning from Elaine in person. And it was at one of these in-person classes that we actually met our business partners. I'd been assisting with Elaine, helping her in these, they were like microscope intensives, where we spend 5 days just working every day on microscope practices and working with large groups of people, which I really enjoy. And we just started noticing that we weren't seeing microorganisms in the compost that we had access to. And we started to notice that it wasn't just me that was not seeing the life in the compost. It was everybody was checking compost from everywhere, and they're just only seeing bacteria or very few microorganisms at all. And so we were all kind of set up and ready to be consultants. That was everyone's plan. That's like in the Catalyst group now. We were all going to go out and try to work in large scale agriculture and try to convert over, this way of farming. But we realized we couldn't do our jobs until we had the compost. And so I never planned on moving back to America or North America. I never planned on starting a large scale compost facility. It just wasn't in my dreams or plans at all. Like I'm not a dump truck person or a tractor girl. Like I never saw myself where I am today. But it was more of we felt like we had to do it, or we weren't going to be able to get anywhere with the career we were actually after. So the four of us just thought, okay, we're gonna get together, we're gonna make compost, we're gonna make this happen. And I think we met, I wish I could remember the dates specifically, but we met in Elaine's class in the summer. And by that fall, we were getting a bank account together. We were pooling our money together, our resources together to get this compost turner that's in the video right now. It was just a little teeny thing, and we, everything we bought was used. Everything was a little tattered and off. and none of us really knew what we were doing. We didn't, know. I mean, Zach knows how to drive a tractor really well, but nobody really knew. Even backing a trailer was foreign to us. It just wasn't something that we'd been involved in. And so we were all very green in our understanding of how to make compost at scale. And we just jumped in and were completely over our heads for the first year. But we did really well. We were able to grow microorganisms out. We were able to do it in a reliable way. We have an awesome team of, they're our customers, but they're really part of the team that makes this mission work, because we can't be consultants. We need other people to be growing microbes. So it's actually turned into this, this beautiful job that I love, that we all love. And we get to watch all these people take our product and then go out to their own gardens or their customers' gardens, or even some of our microbes even go to large scale, agriculture, farm food producers now. And we just get to see people, grow them out, and we get to watch them thrive. And it's really cool. And Matt Powers, he recently started hearing about us through the Soil Food Web School and the promotions they were doing. And he came out, so now we're all on the same team. He's great. And it just keeps building, it's great, Wayne. It's just everyone we meet, it's this Soil Food Web feeling. Like our business, it just feels like a family that's growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And so, now I'm somewhere I wasn't planning to be, but I really like it.
And this slide that's up right now, is that your location and the compost piles there?
Yeah, it is. So unfortunately, last fall we had a forest fire that was started by lightning, and it came up and It hit our property, it got a few of our machines, and it took out our old compost lot. The videos from before with the little green turner, that was in a little teeny 1/8 of an acre compost lot, and that's what we were operating on for 2.5 years. But the fire was a huge motivator. We can't work up there anymore because it's just a mess, and it's not really healthy for us. And we were able to actually put in and start using the lower lot that you're looking at now. And that's, I believe it's almost an acre pad. So we were actually able to scale up our operations by about 4 times what we used to do. And that turner there is, that's an upgraded turner as well that we were able to.
And I'm going to have to apologize. I use a landline to call in because it's better than my satellite system, and this is it. It's beeping at me. So I'm not going to get off. I'm going to actually go into another room, switch the phones. I'm just telling our audience, you guys aren't going to see me for a second. I'm going to keep dialoguing with Keisha here. But so before I leave and have to get the phone, give us a broad scale description of your farm, because you described 2 different locations, it sounds like, maybe scale, and then what do you do other than composting, and what is the scale of the compost piles that you have? We'll talk about sales and where you market your compost a little later. I'm going to just go and grab another phone, and you just keep talking. I'll keep listening, but not looking for a second.
Sure thing. So if you had a bird's eye view of the whole property, we're in about the same area. That small lot is above where this one is. And then surrounding the whole lot is this beautiful farm. It's called Woman Farm. And it's been a social justice school for the past, gosh, I think 60 years they've been teaching it. And they actually used to be a boarding school where people would come to learn about, farming, and it was actually a high school. So the whole land has been organic for probably the entire existence. I don't think that they've ever used chemicals on it. So it made it an ideal spot for us to do our compost. We find that sourcing really high quality ingredients is one of the most important things when you're trying to actually grow microorganisms. There's so much in synthetic fertilizers and fungicides, nematicides, all these asides that do damage to microorganisms, that we actually have to grow our own green material. So if you had a view of a bird's eye view of our entire operation, you'll see our compost lot surrounded by about 15 acres of pasture. So the green material is actually about 20 to 30% of the entire product. And it's a lot of the focus of what we do is treating our pastures with good biology. That way the plants are growing in a healthy soil environment. Those protists and other microorganisms, bacteria, actually cover the surfaces of all of those different green plants that are growing in the field. And so when we cut the hay and we preserve it, we're also preserving a lot of those microorganisms and that nutrition that the plant is able to take from the soil because of the interaction with the microorganisms. So for the past 3 years, we've been treating our pastures, cutting our pastures, baling it, which is a great way to save green material for any kind of livestock, whether it's a cow or an alpaca or microorganisms. We just go with the tried and true method of baling hay. And then you'll also see a lot of woody material, which has been burned. And as awful as the fire was, it was a great source for us to get chips. So now, a lot of our wood chips can come from the surrounding area or from fire clearing on site to prevent future fires. We find with our wood chips, if we can take them from an area that's very brushy and dense, people don't generally spend the money to treat those areas with pesticides or with herbicides or really with anything. Those are the areas of the planet that are just really left alone because they're too dense for humans to access. Well, now that California is having fires, out of control every year, we're able to actually get those wood chips from those brushy areas and preserve those microorganisms that are still on the surfaces of those, of all those different woody materials.
I saw that there was a level in a previous slide on the top of a compost pile. Is there an optimal height that you try to have? Was that the reason for measuring? Because you had a measuring stick down below it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's an optimal height that depends on which turner we're using. I think the Bacchus is around 4 feet tall, and the Mighty Mike might be 3 feet tall. But we have to make sure that windrow fits inside the turner when we run the turner through it. But also when we're trying to understand the volume of the pile, we're measuring the height and the width. But yeah, we put a lot of effort into making sure that all those materials are even throughout the whole windrow, so we don't get variance in temperature, and so the environment is quite the same through the whole windrow. It's really taking a lot of extra measures just to make sure that we don't have dead spots in the compost. When we sell our product, we're often selling it, 10 or 20 pounds at a time, and that product literally goes to people that are using microscopes. They put it under the microscope, and if the microbes aren't there, they're not happy. And so we found that the best way to keep everything similar through the whole windrow is to make sure that everything is at a specific level. There's been a few pictures when you go through where you can see how we layer all the organic materials, and we try to make sure it's all the same all the way across the windrow.
And what is the normal time from when you begin a windrow? And one of the slides again had 0 turns, 1 turn. I think it jumped forward to 4 turns in what you were showing in the slide. And what's the approximate time between the start of a pile and when one is useful now to be using on a field, on an area?
Well, when we're lucky and everything goes according to plan, it's about 8 weeks. But that's not always the case. Unfortunately, they don't always do what I want them to. So some compost piles will take up to 4 or 5 months to get to the biological numbers that I like to see before we sell them. And the thing is we're always trying to get as many different ingredients as possible, clean ingredients. So we're often, it's trial and error. We write everything down, we keep our data, and when something goes wrong and a windrow doesn't work out, these windrows are 180 feet long. And, I can't remember off the top of my head exactly how many yards that ends up being, but you can imagine it's a lot of compost. And so when one of these windrows doesn't work out and we have to hold it on limited space, it's no good for business. It's really, it's one of the biggest challenges we have. But at the same time, I've seen some windrows and I think it's just really good starting materials, but they're just beautiful at 8 weeks old. And the temperatures are all the way down and they're absolutely ready to use. So that's part of the microscope, is we're just always checking, always monitoring, always keeping our data and making sure that all people, that's how I think of them, all the microbes that we want to see are in place.
Without getting into probably a lot of detail related to microbes and their varieties and things, in a healthy soil, about how many different kinds, species, whatever you would want to call them, of microbes are there in the community that's there? About approximate numbers. Is it very, very diverse, hundreds, or is it 20s or 5 or what?
Yeah, well, we've been lucky enough. We're working with this company out of Sacramento called Biomakers, and we've been getting our compost. We're looking at the DNA in the compost, and so they can't pick up. Not everything is sequenced, so they can't tell us exactly how many different species are in. But they were able to recognize over 1,000 species of bacteria and over close to 1,000 species of fungi in one of our compost piles. And so it's a very expensive test, very, very expensive test. But as we have more funds to do this kind of research, we are planning on sequencing more and more windrows so we can see, who what species are going to be in every single windrow, no matter what the variation in materials. We can see, different species that come in, but we know so little. I just know that we have really great diversity, and I would guess that most compost piles that are biologically focused, when we look at it under the microscope, we're not identifying a species. It's difficult to tell. And so it'll look like maybe there's 4, 5, 6 species of fungi, maybe is our guess. But once you start sequencing the DNA, there's so much there that we just don't see. So I would imagine that anyone that's out there using their microscope and seeing these kind of results under the microscope could probably boast the same diversity, if not better.
Cool. By the way, just a couple of comments from some people in the audience. We've got somebody from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, which is kind of cool. Grant Pass, Oregon, Fort Collins, right here in Colorado, Western Kentucky. Cool. Got a very good diversity. A couple questions from the audience, just because you've already talked about at least one of these, and then this last question related to the other. How much does a new turner cost about?
Oh my goodness. Well, the small one, like the one we have, is I think 120,000, maybe 160,000. You can check the Bacchus website. They can give you better information. We bought ours used. We were lucky to be able to access a used turner. But the Mighty Mike turner, the green one that you saw earlier in the presentation, that one costs around 18,000 new. That's not counting delivery, but just to have it created is 18,000. And that's a great starter machine, but you have to have a tractor to pull it. So you're going to look at you're going to incur extra costs there.
Cool. And then this one relates to the diversity of species and how long it takes for a pile to mature. Justine asks, does the season affect the time for the compost pile to be ready?
Absolutely, it does. We have to adjust our recipes always depending on the temperature outside and what we have available, of course. But you might not think this, but the compost actually finishes faster in the winter time. I believe, maybe just when it's colder, the bacteria aren't as aggressive at multiplying as they are during the summer, but it rains during the winter. But I prefer making compost when it's cold outside because our fungal numbers they get there faster.
Cool. That's a great, all these are great questions, but and you've mentioned this a little, but what are your main, this is from Kevin, what are your main compost materials and where do you source your compost material?
Sure, that's a great question. So 60% of our pile is going to be woody materials, and that's adjustable, but we like to use quite a bit of carbon. And so wood chips, almost all of our ingredients we pay for or we grow. There's a big difference between large-scale waste reduction facilities like your local dump and what we do. We are not allowed to have materials dropped off at our site for free because that takes a green waste facility permit. So we're always looking for new materials, and we source them in all kinds of different ways. Sometimes we chase down chip trucks and ask them to, dump the chips at our house so we can load it up in a trailer and bring it in. Sometimes we seek out golf courses or, these places where they have to do a lot of debris clearing and they do the chipping on site. So we've got folks that spend a lot of their time just calling around to anywhere you can imagine, being creative to source these materials. It's really, really challenging. We found in the beginning when we were only making these small windrows that it was no problem. I could call an organic gardener and they'd be happy to give me their pile of weeds that they pulled out of their veggie patch, or it would be easy to just go pick up a pile of wood chips from the side of the road where we saw that they'd done brush clearing. But at a point when you're pulling in hundreds of yards of wood chips at a time, you just have to be very creative. Our other sources of, we have our green materials. That's the hay that we bale up on site that I talked about earlier. We generally try to only buy hay. If we have to buy hay, we try to buy it from people that don't spray. So you can imagine that's another added challenge. Sometimes we spend days calling around from place to place to place, and everybody just sprays their alfalfa, or they've put chemicals on the green material for some reason. So we're often just seeking out that high dollar organic grass just to try to make certain that we don't have these piles that don't meet our minimum requirements for sale. The other ingredient is high nitrogen. And we try to diversify that as much as possible. We do use some manure. Our manure comes from this woman. She's amazing. She has a horse stable. They keep their horses out on pasture as well. And she's a biologist who's actually taken Elaine's classes. Once we started taking manure from her, she got super excited, signed up for the courses. And so she knows exactly what we do, why we do it. And anytime her horses need to have an antibiotic given to them, she will set that manure, that horse will get separated, and that manure will get taken aside. And so that way we know that all the manure that we get is clean. There's no antiparasitics in it. There's no anti-anything, antimicrobials at all. And then I think another video, it was played earlier of these seeds. We love to use seeds as a high nitrogen material. We like to get as much diversity as we can. And so we've been using bird seed as of late. It's a great place where you can get a cheap grain that is just loaded with diversity. There's millet, there's sunflower seeds, there's quinoa. They tend to really pack bird seed mixes out with lots of different species. So for now, that's what we're using. We've had other things, rice chaff or wheat chaff or seed coatings, whatever comes available. Generally what'll happen is we'll find something and we'll love it. It works well in the compost, but we'll exhaust that resource due to the season or just the volume of compost we're producing. So it keeps us on our toes. We're always looking for more organic materials that qualify to be a part of the mix.
And if you were to break down your current income from your farming operations, which is primarily composting, is that your primary income source, or is it consulting or other things? What is your farming primary income?
Yes, I wish I could say that it was from the compost. It's not yet, no. Every single one of us has a second or third or fourth job that keeps this business running. The price of the compost is quite high, and so it looks like we're really rolling in it, but actually paying for input materials, as we've gone through the years of production and actually looked at the costs, it is very expensive. It's like cooking organic meals at home. It's buying these high quality ingredients it's a lot. But that being said, we're learning to refine our processes. We're learning to be, just more clever about everything that we do. And I really think this year or next year, Catalyst will be our main source of income. Right now, there's no way. I think that's typical, though. I hear that businesses often take 3 years before they really are off the ground and running. And so I'm hoping this is our year.
When you do sell, most of your sales bulk, so people driving in large trucks and having trailers and where they're fertilizing a farming situation, or using the compost on a farming, or are they little gardeners for the most part?
We have a lot of different, our customers are as diverse as the microbes in our compost. We have a lot of consultants that have gone through the Soil Food Web School that use our product for their work, and they often are buying in bulk. We do have large-scale organic farms that are, getting bulk deliveries. We ship out a lot of 1 to 2 yard totes. A lot of people are using our product as a compost extract or compost tea. or something to mix into the soil just to invigorate it in the beginning. But recently, I think in the last year, people buy it sometimes by the handful. Students will buy a handful of the compost that are going to the Soil Food Web School because they need to graduate their class. And to graduate, they actually have to have a healthy sample that they're looking at with their microscope and they're quantifying for their teacher. And so we have students that buy our compost just to be able to adventure around and see microbes. Sometimes it's quite hard to make good compost in the beginning. And so they'll just buy a little bit of ours. We also have people that buy 5 or 10, 20, 30-pound packages, and they use them as startup for their own compost. So they'll buy 5 pounds of our compost, and those are the microbes to put into their pile that really gets everything going. And even better, locally to us, we've started selling at farmers markets, and we've got backyard gardeners that grow in containers. You know, they've got 4 tomato plants on their backyard and they buy 5 pounds and they just love it. So what I see is that in the beginning where it was just the high-end crops, now everybody's excited about it. Anyone that's really, you know, had that idea of how microorganisms work with plants put into their brain, they're excited to buy the product. So it's getting more diverse, it's getting more exciting, and we're all over the place with our sales.
Awesome. Where would you like to see both your life and your business in 10 years, let's say?
Oh, 10 years. Woo! Well, I guess there's 2 ways to think about it. A lot of what we do is I really want other people to be making compost. So it's this really interesting thing to think about, where what I would really like in 10 years is to know that all the large scale compost producers in North America, around the world, maybe that's too big, but let's just go big. I would like to see, we at Catalyst would like to see all composting being microbial focused. I would like it if you could go into a store, a Home Depot even, and just pick up good compost. That's essentially the goal. And I guess if it comes to a point that we actually reach our goal, Catalyst might not exist as it is today, because that would mean that there's a lot of other people out there making the kind of compost that we make. So our general plan is to learn how to scale this and then help other people do the same. We really, really, really want to see producers thinking about the microbial content of their compost, and then we want to see farmers thinking about the microbial content of their soil. So on one side, it's really about pushing this idea to people that have more space and more ability to access organic materials and really make massive amounts of compost. And then it's about large-scale agriculture and getting these microbes into the food sources that we all eat. Now, I would love to be able to go to Whole Foods, for example, and just know that everything on that shelf was grown in soil where microbes were present. I imagine that if that was the case, we would all feel a lot better. I think human health would just explode and go through the roof. We'd feel so good if our food was really good. So, maybe 10 years is closer than I think, but that would be the goal.
It'll go by in a heartbeat.
The last 10.
Yeah. Justine asks, what kind of hay do you use? And does it matter? She didn't ask that. That's my portion of it. But what kind do you use?
So we use whatever grows in the pasture. So when we moved in, they'd had a lot of sheep on the pasture, and so most of the land was barren. There was no plants growing at all, and then there was some weedy species throughout. We composted with the weeds, and it made great compost. And now, after we've really treated the land, there's a lot of plants that come up that they're not so much weedy species. They're later successional native grass that just, grows. And we use any of it. The big thing to focus on is diversity. That's what's really important. You don't want one type of grass. You want as many different types of grass as you can get in there. And it doesn't have to just be grass. It can be It could be dock, it could be calendula, it could be mint, it could be whatever you're growing. As long as it's not one of these plants that's very famous for having antimicrobial properties, it's going to work for your compost. So yeah, we just cut and bale whatever grows, and we try to promote diversity. But luckily, our soil is just growing the diverse plants that we need.
Super. You mentioned a partner earlier, and then did the whole group of you from Ecuador come back? So is it, because then I was hearing even more people involved. So is your business sort of multi-family? Or is there a little community?
Our little community. So my partner, I've been with him for Casey Ernst. He's often up with me presenting and these kind of things. We've been together for 10 plus years, and we were in Ecuador together. But the other other two guys in our business, we met at Elaine's class. So Zach Ellis and Gregory Munn, they're students of Elaine's, and they're both local to here. And we just got along great, and we all had passions that were directly in line, and we just jumped in head first to make compost. But interestingly enough, my group from Ecuador, my friends from Ecuador have actually, a few of them have signed on to Elaine's classes and taken the same path that I did, and they're starting a compost facility down there too. I'm not involved with it as an owner or anything like that. I just, I'm a cheerleader for them. But yeah, I'm starting to see it come back around. So we have our community here in California, and then the community that I left is also taking charge and making microbes for the folks that live there. So the idea is catching on, definitely.
In the process, how much manual labor when you have the turner is there? So how much is it shoveling and so on?
It's a good amount of work for 2 or 3 people. So the way we build our windrows, it's a little bit of a machine-human fusion. So Zach is often on the tractor. He's very, very good with finesse and splitting one bucket into 18 different parts, which is kind of mind-blowing for me. But you'll always see 2 or 3 of us on the other side of the pile, and we'll have, our rakes, our pitchforks, our shovels, and we're the ones that spread everything out and make sure it's very even. Yeah, we haven't gotten completely away from labor hours. In the beginning, those guys, I tell you, they would be pitchforking materials from all over the place. We had 2 trailers, and we would just be collecting organic material from farm after farm after farm. And those guys put in way too much work, just manual labor. And I guess, like, if you're a person who's going to try to start making compost at a small scale, that's something that you have to consider, is it is a lot of manual labor, and it's not easy on the body. But as we scale and as we get new machines and we get smarter and more money, it gets more and more mechanized. But we still, every time we build a windrow, there's 4 of us, 5 of us there. And yeah, we do it a little bit by hand and a little bit with the machine.
How do you market and sell? And marketing for others and is really not selling. Marketing is sort of the materials you use to help you sell. And then sales is the actual process of having it change hands. So how do you market and sell?
So the Instagram that you guys have been watching through the whole presentation has been the only effort that we have put out for marketing. A lot of our business comes from word of mouth. And so what will happen, one person will use the product and then they tell all their friends about it. So it's actually like our team, our customer base that has done so much of the work for us. They're fantastic, always sharing good news. And then the school, I mean, we get to be involved in these webinars with Elaine. And so very often, Casey and I will be, on the internet, answering questions, participating, and we get a little bit of a push from that as well. But generally speaking, we haven't done much marketing yet. We've been nervous that if it really, if really, 2,000 people called me today, I wouldn't have enough compost to sell them. So we've been trying to scale smartly. One of our biggest fears is that, this is weird too, because it would mean more money, but one of the biggest fears is that the success would push us into going too far too fast and the quality of the product would come down. So we've really, really been careful to scale really slowly, to not take on more than we can handle as far as customers go, and to try to keep our product, no matter what size, our lot is, keeping our product the same quality. And that's going to be our aim as far as we can scale up. That's what we're trying to go for. I've heard so many times of just really fantastic compost companies getting bought out by the big guys, and then the pressure's on for them to create the product and sell, and quality goes down the drain. So we're trying really hard to keep that under our control, under reign, until we figure out how to do it at a scale where we can just, have microbes out the door as fast as demand would like.
If I bought a 55-pound bag, which would probably be about maybe a tenth of a yard, or if I bought a cubic yard, or if I bought a pickup load, which is probably 3 cubic yards, what is the approximate price that you charge for your product?
So it depends. If you were to come get the 55 pounds from the warehouse and pick it up from us during a time that we're open, we would charge around $100. It basically is like $2 a pound, I guess. As you scale up, it's more expensive when we ship it because we have to go to the post office and sales are just not regular. So it's far more expensive when a package gets mailed out. But yeah, so a yard is $7.50. 55 pounds is, gosh. I'm not the numbers person of the group, but I think the 40-pound bag goes for, gosh, I don't know. Makes me want to get on my website and look the prices up. But the price is really going to depend on whether or not we're having to package it up, ship it out via post office, or whether you're going to come by during our business hours. There we go. Thank you. Yeah, so 10 pounds is $80. 40 pounds is $200. That doesn't include the shipping either. But it's really, really reduced for the folks that come in and the local people that come in while we're already open and we have somebody available. It's difficult. A lot of our guys, and us included, we live quite a far away from the farm. So you can't imagine, sometimes we'll come all the way down the hill and spend 3 hours just packaging up something to send to one person. But it is something we're looking at, is actually putting our compost into bags and then getting them out on the shelves. And so that would really bring the price down quite a bit. I think we were pricing, was it 20 pounds, 40 pounds at $55. It's like half of what we sell it for right now if we actually get it into the stores, because that just takes away all of our packaging. It puts it all on the store. And so, they're the ones that have to be there and have to sell it. And so we're working on figuring out a way to actually package the product so that it's shelf stable and that people can still rely on that quality, even though it's in a plastic bag on a shelf sitting for, who knows, a month sometimes.
What are some new things you'd like to be doing with your farm and with what you're doing with the compost, if there are?
Yeah, what I really have interest in for the future is figuring out really what you can get away with for good results with the product. So when we started, we assumed that it would take 1 to 5 yards per acre of our product to actually see good results. And that was just ideas that we'd had from our own regeneration efforts on a very small scale. But very recently, we've had some large-scale farmers that are using our product at like less than 20 pounds per acre. And they're seeing these incredible results from just this very, very, very small amount of compost. And so I'm really wondering, if that's not bringing the soil up to the numbers that we want to see it, it's not like 1 or 2 applications at this rate is going to fix it. But they are getting these fantastic results from it. So I'm curious in the future to play around with the compost more and use these bigger machines and like really, get it out on larger swaths of land and look at the data, see how everything comes back. We've been so focused on just making compost. We don't have much time to apply it, but that's really the next step. And then also the DNA research, like I was talking about earlier. When we're thinking about scaling up and we want to start going, large scale compost, waste reduction, and we're trying to make, waste reduction materials actually like a nice, stable biological product, there are these issues that we come across with the input materials not being clean and being treated with chemicals. And so I have this idea from what Elaine has taught us, that if we can use an inoculum, that we already have microbes present, and then we start to compost with these green materials and woody materials that have been treated with these synthetic chemicals that we're so afraid of, I believe in time what we'll end up doing is selecting for the kind of microorganisms that break that stuff down. And that would be the ticket, is if we could figure out a way to, be working in a facility that's producing 300, 600 tons per day, and we know that the microorganisms that we're cultivating are actually breaking down the glyphosate and the other chemicals that, they're things that we don't want to come through the system. And so, yeah, that's really what I'm looking forward to in the future is working at scale, working with, trying to cultivate specific types of microorganisms, and then learning how far we can go with large scale application.
Justine has another great question. What's the shelf life of your product?
It is a good question. So we have some people that have actually, I got a complaint from someone once that they bought a compost from us like a year and a few months previous to the complaint, and they had one of the groups of microorganisms had gone down, but everything else still looked great. And I thought, well, you've done such a lovely job taking care of the compost to only lose one group of microorganisms. So you can think of it like it's living. So I could send you a yard of compost, and it's completely possible that if you leave it out in the sun and it dries out, that those numbers would drop down and go away in just a few days if it gets too hot and too dry too fast. But if you take the compost and you use it thoughtfully and you keep it in the shade and you keep it moist, not too wet, yeah, it could last for over a year. There is a point where we start to see the numbers just fall, and I think it's just because the food resources get used up. So at that point, they have to be fed or put in the soil or somewhere where they can eat. But yeah, the shelf life varies just depending on care. And, that's something that we just have to basically educate each customer about and just let them know how to take care of their new micro babies.
We have about 6 minutes left, so I'm going to implore our audience to put some more questions in. A lot of you out there, and if you've got them, I'm going to continue to ask until I see some from you. What would you recommend that a compost user be able to identify in the compost to make sure that it was healthy? Would they have to have some of those microscopy skills, or is there anything they could just do by physically using their eyes to look at it?
Well, yeah, so it is best to be able to check it with the microscope. If you're looking for microbial content, it's the only way to really know. But moisture, if you go to buy some compost and it's dry, just very, very, very dry, you feel it with your hand, you squeeze it and it just falls apart, that's not really conducive to micro life. So a lot of the times, like, what you're looking for is a nice moisture content. When you squeeze it, that it's like, imagine a piece of chocolate cake, and what would happen to that chocolate cake if you squeezed it in your hand. And that's about the moisture content you're going to want to see in a really rich blend. Another thing is the color. If it's very, very dark, like black in color, or if it has, a lot of white throughout it, that's probably not the best stuff. You're looking for like the color of a dark chocolate bar. That's our compost there on the screen. It's Definitely not all the way dark, but a light brown color is what you're actually looking for. Another test, and it's possible for compost companies to add humic acid powders or humates to their blends, but one thing you can do is you can take that compost, you put it in a paint strainer bag, and when you stick it in a 5-gallon bucket of water, and you shake it, you're going to see this lovely color come out into the water. And if you see that chocolatey color come out into the water, that's humic acid and fulvic acid, and it's a sign that you've got good fungi in there that are actually creating these substances. So yeah, there's a few tools that you have at your disposal besides the microscope.
Yeah, you gave some great ones there. That's awesome. What would a compost that I bought at Home Depot, which probably is not anything more than just ground up organic matter, what would it cost typically? I'm guessing a lot less.
A lot less. So if you're buying by the bag, I mean, sometimes they go as low as, $5 or $6 a cubic foot would be on the very, very low end. As far as the yardage goes, our stuff is going at $7.50. A lot of the material that you buy local here is going from $50 to $150. And then if people are adding food resources to that material, it'll be upwards of $350, $400. But that's the thing that you got to remember is it's just a different way of doing things. Like the dump is they're getting organic materials and they don't want to just bury it in the ground. So that compost is actually, it's a waste product of the reduction industry. And so a lot of times, like you say, it's wood chips mixed with cow manure, and they're just kind of waiting until it cools off, and then that's what's going into the garden. And so sometimes you end up with some harmful compounds that I don't think they intend for them to be there. I don't think they're thinking of it in that way. And so, a lot of times you're going to do more harm than good with those materials. But I can completely understand why it's better to sell a bag of compost than to just bury the organic materials in the ground with all the plastics. So, there's got to be this, hopefully there's a day when we can all meet in the middle, and that stuff that's coming out of, your local dump, your local green waste facility, maybe they'll think about it just a little bit more. I know it's starting to become more common practice for them to separate out chipboard and treated lumber and things that have really bad chemicals in it. So I'm really hoping to see in the future that, what if biologically complete compost could cost $150 a yard? Like, that would just be so ideal. And it's definitely the goal. So, let's just hope in the future that we can figure this out and start to see more people at scale actually working towards this common goal. Because I mean, man, if I could just go and get a base material of compost and mix ours into, our customer base would be so happy just to know that someone big was working on making a really good material. Maybe it's not as high quality, but closer. So there is a big difference in price.
Yeah, no, all over the map. So I've got one more from our audience, from Justine. And again, type some questions in. This will be the last call for questions here for everybody. Great question here. She says, and this is great to be kind of in the end of the presentation type question. This is Justine, I'm working on the Foundation Course 1 for the Soil Food Web School. Can I reach out to you in the future with questions?
Of course. Yeah, my Instagram is a great place to find me. Catalyst Microbe Adventures or Soil Microbe Library. I host both of those pages. My literal phone number is on our website.
Yep, we're seeing it right there. So, okay.
Oh, did I cut out?
No, we're seeing the phone number. It's right there on the page. So.
That's it. So yeah, you can contact me with questions. No problem. That's what I'm here for.
Awesome. Well, that's really nice. And Justine says, thank you. And this is more probably an Elaine question, but if a person was working full-time as a certified soil food web consultant, about how many clients could they be working with, do you think?
Well, that's a good question. And I don't know the answer because I have not been pursuing that aspect of the career. But, you know, I would say it's very involved being a consultant. You know, the farm is really, really counting on you. So I would imagine in the beginning, it would be less because you really want to focus on them. And then as you get more experience, I would imagine you could also take on more clientele. But yeah, I can't really answer that question.
Well, I don't see any other questions here, and we're a little bit past the top of the hour. This has been awesome, Keisha, and we didn't talk about the dog. I'm a dog guy, and I see your puppy there. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But maybe another time. I got a hint from Mark or Reed at the front end here that if you enjoyed this and the audience liked it, that you might be willing to come back and talk again. Is that right?
Yeah, of course.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'll even bring Ollie on. He can make a guest appearance.
Oh, cool. Well, we'll definitely talk about that. And I'm sort of looking here again. No other questions. I've got tons of them, but I'll save mine. I could call Keisha up and do that separately. Mainly from the perspective, again, I don't know if some of you were on, but right now, Elaine and I are negotiating a relationship between the EAT group and Soil Food Web. And it may be that we have a very formal relationship, very good when I say formal, very sincere and very important relationship moving ahead. We're just in the middle of sort of negotiating all the details of that. So we're excited about that. And here we go. We've got one more. This last question. Well, last question we're going to get. So it looks like she's typing it because she says one more before you leave. Sorry, I'm late. This is Melanie. She says she's looking for advice on how to source good nitrogen for her compost, and she's in Nevada County. So.
Okay, well, let's see. If you only need a tote or so, like 14, 15 gallons, you could call me and I could probably get you some manure. But what I would say is get on Google and type in Nevada County manure producer. And what's going to come up is there's a really, really nice spreadsheet that I'm not sure who put it out, but it's really easy to find. And it's got probably 50 different manure producers on there. And there's everybody from alpaca farmers to pig farmers to goat farmers. And their phone numbers and email addresses are listed right there. And so you can just call farm after farm. And there's a lot of great ones where you could go and load yourself up and there'll be 5 different kinds of manure at that one farm. A lot of people here are hobby farmers, so they'll have a little bit of everything, and that way you're going to get that diversity that you're looking for, and you're going to keep it local. So yeah, just Google that list and it'll come up, and if you can't find it, let me know, and I'll do my best to get that over to you.
Well, awesome. All right. Well, Keisha, again, it's been lots of fun. You are welcome anytime to come out here to Colorado. We actually have 1,000 cubic yards of our own compost that we've created, not necessarily paying attention to all the right approaches. However, my wife and I are both microscopists. Our compost is very rich in microbes, and we use it for just our own use. We've got 40 acres of pastures that we use for hay because we're all completely organic, natural, regenerative for our livestock. So it's completely for our own purpose. But we turn down 100 different requests for compost a year in our area just because we just don't have enough. We really need to produce it for just ourselves. So, there's a demand, huge demand out there. So.
That's true. Well, it's good to hear that. Farming Lane. It was really nice to formally meet you.
Yeah.
I'll see you soon.
You bet. And we will we'll work hard to get Keisha on again, everybody. Thank all of you. You've been a great audience. Thank you for your questions. And we have an amazing guy coming up in 2 days that is a no-till agriculture guy, one of the founders of that concept. He actually has a foundation called No-Till Agriculture, and his website is no.till, which is kind of cool. So Steve Schwab is his name, and he'll be with us 2 days from now. Thank you, everybody. And Mark, why don't you take us out?
Bye-bye.